Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Cardboard Kitchen. Um, Today, at this time, we're going to go over the second rule of the kitchen, which is legendary Eldrazi's can't attack. So, the reason there is this rule in place in the kitchen, particularly the Cardboard Kitchen, is because I predominantly play with a group of people who play Kozilek, Butcher of Truth, Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and Ulamog the Infinite Gyre in their decks. They play the Kozilek and the first printing of the Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, as ways to overcome mill decks. Nobody likes losing to mill. A lot of people like playing mill, but nobody likes losing to mill. And those cards have a particular clause that state whenever they go to your graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle your entire graveyard back into your deck. Other cards that can do this, there's a card called Gaia's Blessing. It's one generic and a green, and it says it's a sorcery in green for 2 mana that says target player shuffles up to 3 cards back into their deck, and then you draw a card. Or if it gets sent from your library, so from your deck to your graveyard, you shuffle your entire graveyard back into your library. So that's another option you could use. Again, it's green. Loaming Shaman is another option you could use to do something similar. It's also green. It's a green creature. It's 2 generic and a green. When it comes into play, you can have any player shuffle any number of target cards from their graveyard back into their library. So you could hit your own graveyard. There's also a card that doesn't see play really anymore at all, I think. Before the Eldrazi Titans, I played this card a lot just because I didn't like getting hit by mill, and this card helps do that. And the name of the card is called Primal Command. Primal Command is also green. It's 3 generic green. It was part of the command cycle from the original Lorwyn block. It's got 4 different modes. You pick 2 of them. One of those modes is you shuffle your graveyard back into your library. It's actually the first mode, I think. One of the other modes is you can search your deck for a creature card, reveal it, shuffle your library, put that card in your hand. So shuffling your graveyard back into your library and then going and finding a creature card effectively lets you pull the creature that you wanted that might have been in your graveyard back into your hand, and also shuffling a bunch of extra stuff back into your library. It has 2 other modes. The other 2 modes are not serendipitous, but that was a 5 mana sorcery that green could use to essentially get a reload on graveyard being empty and stuff being back in your library. There is another card that any deck can play. It's called Elixir of Immortality. It's an artifact. It's 1 to play, 2 to use. So 1 generic for an artifact. You pay 2, you tap it, and you shuffle the elixir and your graveyard back into your library, and you gain 5 life. The wording of the ability is important because a lot of people that play it don't pay attention to the wording and just assume that you have to sacrifice it. So they usually pay 2, tap it, and immediately put it in their graveyard as if they've sacrificed it. The wording states that you shuffle it and your graveyard back into your library. So that matters because if somebody has a response where they exile your library in response to you activating the ability, you still shuffle the elixir back in. You won't shuffle your graveyard, but you'll shuffle the elixir back in, which is important. Also, the elixir can go in any deck, and the elixir gains you 5 life every time you pop it. So, the rule number 2 is legendary Eldrazi's can't attack. It's primarily because of the Kozilek and the Ulamog and the second Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. Nobody likes the Annihilator triggers, and nobody likes exiling the top 20 cards of their deck whenever the Ceaseless Hunger attacks them or attacks their direction. Because technically, if I was playing at a table and one of my opponents had a Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger in play, and I had a Planeswalker in play, even if they attack the Planeswalker, I am the defending player, so I would still exile the top 20 cards, even though they're not dealing any damage to me. They're going to be dealing damage to the Planeswalker because of how the wording of the Ceaseless Hunger's ability is set up. The same is true for the Annihilator triggers. The Annihilator triggers say defending player sacrifices 4 permanents. So, again, if I have a Planeswalker and those Eldrazi's attack the Planeswalker, I still have to sacrifice 4 permanents. Nobody likes these things. Nobody wants to deal with these things. They're problems. They themselves are problems. But they're less scary in my playgroup, because in my playgroup they don't swing. They might sit on the table and block for a few turns, but they don't swing. But not every playgroup plays with the same rules that I play with. I also, there was no good way to word the rule, the Cardboard Kitchen rule, to make it be just those 3, and then I thought about it really hard and I looked some stuff up. There are other legendary Eldrazi's that have come out thanks to the new legendary, the new Eldrazi pre-con that came out. They got some nasty boys in there, and I'll be perfectly honest, I don't want to see any of those guys swing whatsoever. Now that doesn't mean that, if you sit at a table, like if you're in my area and you play at some of those shops that I play at, that doesn't mean that if you sit at my table, I'm going to expect you to follow the rules of the kitchen, because you're not in the kitchen. You're wherever that store is. But I would very much appreciate it if you took my secondary rule into account. I'm not saying follow the rule. I'm not even saying you have to care about the rule or you have to play with the rule. It's something to think about if you play with those cards or you play those decks, and your group is kind of getting tired of seeing you play those things because of those reasons. Another reason why people don't like seeing anything with Annihilator is predominantly because there's another Eldrazi that's usually in those lists, and that Eldrazi is called It That Betrays, which is a colorless Eldrazi that says whenever an opponent sacrifices a permanent, whatever it is, if you sacrifice it and you are an opponent to the player playing It That Betrays, that player gets it. The permanent that you sacrificed that went to your graveyard, that player gets it into play under their control. And that's also not fun, because at that point it's not just forcing you to give up resources or a board state or whatever the case is. In the process, the player that's forcing you to do that is also gaining all of it. And that's not fun. Nobody likes that either. If you're gonna play stuff that basically destroys my deck in various ways, so that's another thing. I'm gonna jump on a tangent here. I've played. I guess at this point I'll say I've played. I'm 34. I've been playing trading card games since I was 8 years old. So in most other card games, mill and board wipes and all that kind of stuff it's predominantly mill. In most other card games, it's called deck destruction. Anything that forces your hand to go away or forces you to ditch your current hand and get a new hand is called hand destruction. In most other card games. In Magic, we call, the stuff that basically forces us to do our hands or whatever, get rid of our hands and get new hands, we call those wheels, because you're getting rid of what you have and getting fresh stuff. But if you're gonna sit here and play Magic with me and you're gonna play all these effects that basically destroy my deck at different turns. Like, you're going to force me to give up my board state or my lands or whatever, and then you're going to also gain those because you're playing a really dumb 11 drop card. Um, or you're going to play things that say, oh, when X whatever happens, put the top however many cards of your deck into your graveyard. Whatever the case is. I think there's a spell that's like 3 or 4 mana that makes each opponent mill 14, which is really dumb. But, it is what it is. That's... I used to not play the 3 Eldrazi's that I named, the Ceaseless Hunger, Infinite Gyre, Butcher of Truth. I used to not really heavily play those. If you got 3 extra slots in a deck list or deck recipe or whatever that you're building, those are good slots to fill. They're definitely useful if you make it to the later portion of the game where you have that much mana to cast them or whatever the case is. Also, they all 3 of them have cast triggers. Their cast triggers are useful. The Kozilek draws you 4 cards. You could also play Kozilek the Great Distortion, but his mana requirement is a little more tricky, especially in decks that play, if you're playing a bunch of cards that require 2 or 3 pips of whatever type. Like, several of the decks that I play, like, I've got a number of cards that are like 2 green pips or 2 black pips or whatever, and then there are other cards that, go well in the deck that have triple of those pips. So playing Kozilek the Great Distortion is a little trickier because that's the other thing. I'm a weirdie. I have started trying to build my decks for Commander based on the Canadian Highlander points list, and I'm trying to not include anything that I could not play in my Commander decks that I could not play in the Canadian Highlander format. So it's a little trickier for me because, one, that immediately means I don't get Command Tower. I don't get to play Command Tower. A little trickier because Command Tower only works when you're playing specifically the Commander format. In Canadian Highlander, you don't have a Commander, so it's a land that does nothing. The other thing is, in addition to that, I'm trying to not include cards that are on the Canadian Highlander point list that require points to be able to put in your deck for the Canadian Highlander format. So oddly enough, that also means, guess what? I'm not playing Sol Ring. In some of my more recent lists, I'm just not putting in Sol Ring. So because I'm not putting in Sol Ring, I don't have a dedicated source that gives me colorless mana, which is where the tricky part is for the Great Distortion. So Kozilek Butcher of Truth has a cast trigger where you draw 4 cards. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre has a cast trigger. You get to destroy any one target permanent in play. Just whatever target permanent you want, kill it. It's destroy effect, it's dead. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger has a cast trigger of you may exile up to 2 target permanents. So that one's a little bit better than the Infinite Gyre. Because it's exile, not destroy, and you hit 2 things instead of 1. The difference, actually, I don't see how that one's any actually worse at all. So Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, is cheaper to cast than Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. The cast trigger ability, exiles instead of destroys, and you hit 2 things instead of 1. And they're both indestructible. So I really honestly don't see, like, sitting here thinking about it, I don't see how the Ceaseless Hunger is worse than the Infinite Gyre. If anything, I would say the Infinite Gyre is worse. The difference is Ceaseless Hunger does not have the legendary Eldrazi text of, if it goes to your graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle your whole graveyard. That text rests with Kozilek Butcher of Truth and Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. It also rests with Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, but that card's not legal in Commander. Hasn't been for a while. Probably won't ever be again. Just because that's just no, no, just no. But Kozilek, the Great Distortion, costs, I think it's 8 generic and 2 guaranteed colorless, so it costs 10 mana, which is why I say for me personally it would be a little trickier to put in some of my lists. If you're playing a deck and you're trying to fill out some of these slots and you have dedicated colorless mana sources like Temple of the False God, Ancient Tomb, Soul Ring, stuff like that, I haven't made a list that includes Temple of the False God in 5 years. Now that I think about it, at least 5 years. Um, it's not a bad land. It's a good land. Ancient Tomb's a great land. Ancient Tomb's played in CDH, but it can stay over there. I don't need an Ancient Tomb in casual play. My decks would probably run better if I played an Ancient Tomb in my casual decks, but I don't need it. It's not a requirement. Soul Ring isn't a requirement. Temple of the False God's not a requirement. They're good. They help the deck work better. You can typically cast your more expensive stuff faster. Most of the time, I'm playing decks where, you know, on any average turn, I'm gonna need. I think when I did the crunch the numbers and did the math, on any given number turn beyond turn 3, I'm gonna basically need roughly 2.5 pips of whatever color. So like the card I'm playing is more than likely gonna have 2 colored pips of, like, if I'm playing a blue green deck or whatever, like a Simic deck. The card I'm playing more than likely is going to require either 2 green pips or 2 blue pips, or roughly 1.5 pips of each. Um, there are some cards that are like, you require green and you require blue, plus you require a hybrid, which is effectively 1.5. So because I'm playing cards that require such heavy on the pip side, most of my land package has to be lands that produce color. So I can't, in most of my decks, I can't afford to play lands that don't produce color in some way. I'm trying to find a good mix to play the pain lands and the filter lands in some of my more current lists. It's a little more difficult. What I'm seeing is, more often than not, I'm seeing the pain land doesn't work with the filter land, and I don't see, like, I see, it feels like I see one pain land that produces color, but it produces an off color that does not work with the filter land that I see. And so it's really difficult for me to get the appropriate mana typings on the turns I need them. So I'm debating not continuing to play those, just because even though I, like, if I play a 3 color deck, I play all 3 pain lands in some of my more recent lists, and I play, depending on the color combination, I either play 3, 4, or 5 filter lands. I prefer the older filter lands to the newer filter lands. The newer filter lands are great, kind of. They can tap to produce a colorless mana, or you can put a colored mana into them to filter how you need, whether you need 2 pips, one of each pip, or 2 of your alternate color. Like Twilight Mire's Green Black. It's the newer run of filter lands for Green Black. So you could tap Twilight Mire to produce a colorless mana, or you could pay a green or a black into Twilight Mire and tap it and produce either 2 green, a green and a black, or 2 black. Um, Not terrible. Good option for a filter land. I recommend, if you're trying to figure out your mana bases and all that kind of stuff, definitely go look at the filter lands. Uh, I would say that we need the original filter lands. We need to finish off those cycles. We only have the allied cycles, so we've got a filter land. So the old filter lands don't produce mana at all by themselves. You have to pay one generic mana into them, but then you get a guaranteed color combination out. So like Mossfire Valley, I think it is the red green one. So you pay one generic in, and you get a red and a green out. There's Sungrass Prairie, which is generic in. You get a green and a white out. So they've got one for red, green, green, white, white, blue, blue, black, and black, red. But we only have those 5 for that filter land combination. I feel like if they're going to do more land cycles and bring in more filter stuff, could we get the, maybe give us the other 5 for that cycle? Give us the white, black, the black, green, the blue, green, the blue, red, the red, white of that cycle. So that way we have our full run of all of our possible filter lands. I've jumped topic, which is fine. I actually had a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about in this video, but the main thing I wanted to get off my chest was rule number 2, which was legendary Eldrazi's can't attack, and my reasoning. The reason I have this rule, and the reason the Cardboard Kitchen has this rule, is predominantly because the legendary Eldrazi's that are included in most of the lists that I've been playing, and I'm trying to get away from it, but it's really difficult because I'm finding that I have these available slots in my lists towards the end, and I can't figure out what to put in the decks. That it's like they just kind of have a spot. But predominantly, they don't swing. They're used for their cast trigger, and they're entering your graveyard from anywhere trigger, which is to shuffle your entire graveyard back into your library. So I said my piece about that. I said my piece about the filter lands that I thought I've been thinking. This past week has been a lot of up and downs for me. So I've had ideas for the past couple of weeks of like various things I wanted to talk about. Trying to talk about those things and whatnot. I had some other things I wanted to talk about. My brain just died, I think. So yeah. Because I never finished the Kozilek Great Distortion. So the Kozilek Great Distortion also has a cast trigger, but it's 8 generic and 2 colorless. So for me, it's a little difficult to play. But if you're playing enough colorless sources in your deck and you want to put it in, go for it. So the cast trigger on that Kozilek is whenever you cast it, you count the number of cards in your hand, and then you draw a number that would put you to 7. So like if you have 4, you're going to draw 3. If you have 0, you draw 7. If you have 6, you draw 1. Basically it's the cast trigger of Kozilek, the Great Distortion, is supposed to allow you to fill out your hand and make it a full grip of 7. So if again, it's not something I'm going to be playing, even though I've thought several times about playing it. I don't have enough colorless sources. I don't play enough things in my decks that are colorless sources to be able to play it, I feel. Especially with me trying to play based on like being able to build a commander deck that can also be played as a Canadian Highlander deck that doesn't use any cards on their point list. Which, if you're interested in, if you like the format of Commander, and you would like to see how your Commander deck does in a slightly different format where you don't have access to your Commander at any particular given time, like you would have to draw them and use them and so on and so forth, I recommend that you kind of do what I've been trying to do. Build your deck based off of being Commander legal, but also being legal for Canadian Highlander, and try not to use anything on the points list. I'm saying try not to use anything on the points list, but definitely go look at their point list and see what cards they've got pointed at what value. And if you wanted to build your deck to be legal in both formats and still meet the criteria using cards from the point list, by all means do that. It's just, for me, it's a nifty trick for me to try and help me win deck building. I'm using it as a way to try and help me find newer cards to play, other cards to play, things that I don't typically play, all that kind of fun stuff. Like, just finding other cards to play that's not the every pre-built commander deck that Wizards of the Coast comes out with comes with a Sol Ring, and they're still like $2 and $3 a piece as an individual card. Monocolor decks don't need a Sol Ring. 2-color decks probably don't need a Sol Ring. 3-color decks, I could understand it. That comes back to my thought process on building decks that are 1 and 2 colors. They don't need a command tower. Anything over 2 colors needs a command tower because it's so hard to filter for the color combinations that you need that command tower is useful. Any deck that's one color, doesn't matter what the color is. I honestly don't care what the color is. Mono white has the worst rap for some of its stuff. Mono white. There are cards in mono white that will fetch you planes and put them into play. Again, if you're in mono white, Solemn Simulacrum, you go find a basic. Cool, you go find a basic plane. So that's all you're going to find anyway. But, that's an option. There's a card that I play in a lot of my decks that play white. It's called Core Cartographer. Core Cartographer, yeah. It's a 3 generic and a white creature for 2/2. When it comes into play, search your deck for a plains card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. It's a slightly better land fetch than Solemn is. It's a 2/2 body for 4 mana. Solemn will only fetch you a basic, but it'll fetch you a basic of whatever color you need. Core Cartographer will fetch you any plains card. So Canopy Vista, Temple Garden, Sacred Foundry, Prairie Stream, Hallowed Fountain, Tundra, Plateau, whatever. Any of those, it'll go find them and put them into play tapped. So it'll get you a non-basic version. So if you're in a 2-color deck, you can go get your other color. If you're in mono white, it's still ramp. It's a second Solemn that just doesn't draw you a card when it dies. That's the only difference. It requires colored mana to play it. It'll fetch you any plains card in the deck instead of a basic. And it doesn't draw you a card when it dies, but it can effectively help you fix your mana. So if you're in 2 colors, hey, go grab a plains. Boom. You've got both your colors because you're going to go grab a non-basic that is both your colors. If you're in 3 colors, go find your Triome. Whatever the case may be, like, just stuff that I've thought about for a couple of weeks now that I'm trying to get in a video format. Just, the rule number 2, which was the big point of this video, rule number 2, Legendary Eldrazi can attack. So I started looking at some of my decks a little bit closer. Started looking at some of my mana bases a little bit closer. I'm probably gonna start including Skyshroud Claim and Ranger's Path in any deck that plays green. I don't care if it's 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, 4 color, 5 color, whatever. I'm probably gonna start including those in any deck that plays green. If I'm playing a 5-color deck, I'm gonna play. I think it's called Slimefoot's Survey. It's a 5 mana ramp spell. It's 4 generic and a green, and it says search your deck for 2 land cards, up to 2 land cards with basic land types. So you can go get 2 Triomes, whatever. It has, there's more to the ability, but that's the big one at 5 mana. So in a 5-color deck, you could go basically fetch two different triomes to cover all five uh, all five colors essentially in your 2 triomes, and then you're set. Skyshroud Claim is 3 generic and a green. Search your deck for 2 force cards, put them into play. You can get non-basics with it. They come into play however they would normally come into play. Ranger's Path does the same thing for the exact same mana costs. Both of those cards are 3 generic and a green. Ranger's Path, however, has a slight alteration. Search your deck for 2 force cards, put them into play tapped. So, if you're playing a deck that's green plus another color, or green plus 2 colors, what's a good one? Jund. Jund is black, red, green. So if you're playing that triple color combination and you play, gonna give you a magical Christmas land scenario here. Turn 1, untapped mana source that's green. Exploration. Exploration is a green enchantment for 1 green that says on each of your turns you can play an additional land. So you play that. You play an untapped green source. You play Exploration. You play another untapped land. You play Sol Ring. That's your turn 1. Whatever. Happy day. Pass. Say it gets back to you. You still have all that in play. Okay. Play your 2 lands that you can for the turn because of the Exploration. Use your Sol Ring and 2 of your lands, one of which being green, and play Skyshroud Claim and search your deck for 2 more forest cards. Here at Cardboard Kitchen, we're okay with playing proxies because Magic has gotten too expensive. So maybe you grab a Bayou and a Taiga because you've proxied them up. Or you have actual versions. Some of you guys have actual versions. We could really use that down here. But let's say, you use your Sol Ring and you use 2 lands and you go get a Taiga and a Bayou. Well, that fixes you. That's 2 green land, 2 forest cards that'll also produce your choice of red and or black. Then that gives you 4 more mana. You pay those 4 mana and you play Ranger's Path and you go find, you can go find the new Surveil lands. So you could go find the red-green Surveil land and the green-black Surveil land. And you put those into play. They come into play tapped normally, but Ranger's Path also forces them to come into play tapped. So if they would come into play untapped, they instead come into play tapped. But, and then, so now you've got 6 lands and a Sol Ring, and that's your turn 2. So on turn 3, you're rolling into money. You can play whatever you draw. You can probably play your commander depending on who your commander is. But in addition to that, you went and fetched up 2 Surveil lands. Well, guess what? Each one of those has a Surveil 1 trigger, so now you can potentially filter your deck, the top of your deck, to have the stuff that you want. And if each one of those triggers is more lands, they're going in the bin. You know that they're going in the bin. You've got 6 lands and a Sol Ring. If my count is right, you're down to 1 card in your hand, but 8 mana on turn 3, hoorah. At that point, you probably don't need lands. You're probably set for a couple of turns. You can draw other stuff. So, I've started looking at my mana bases. I'm trying to find better options, and I'm looking at all of my decks that play green and seeing where I can fit in a Skyshroud Claim and a Ranger's Path. Those definitely, if I'm playing 5 colors, Slimefoot Survey, just because of because of its primary ability, which is you get to go find 2 lands with a basic land type and put them into play. I think you put them into play tapped. And then the secondary ability of Slimefoot Survey is you count your domain. Domain is the ability that counts the number of different land types among lands you control, and then you get to do something based on that number. In Magic, that number is 5. That's a magical number. Plains, islands, swamps, mountains, forests. So you can only have 5. But with the Slimefoot Survey, you go fetch up 2 Triomes and you get all 5 covered in your 2 Triomes. And then the remaining effects of the Slimefoot Survey say, look at the top 5 cards of your library, pick one of those cards to stay on top of your library, and the other 4 get randomized and put on the bottom of your library. So you can dig the top 5 and pick the one that you want to stay on top. And you do that after you fetch your lands. So you get to go find the lands first, shuffle your deck, and then dig 5, find the card that you want to keep in the 5, and leave it on top, and the other 4 go to the bottom in a random order. That's pretty decent for 5 mana. Also, probably only going to really play that card in a 5-color deck, because you're not going to play it in 2, because then it's 5 mana, go fetch up 2 lands, basically top 2, you got a 50-50. You could play it in 3 and 4, just because 3 and 4 is still okay, but 5's where it wants to be. Unless, of course, you're playing Prismatic Omen or Dryad of the Elysian Grove. So Dryad of the Elysian Grove says, while it's in play, every land you control is every basic land type, in addition to whatever other types it is. Prismatic Vista does the same thing, but it's an enchantment instead of a creature. Dryad of the Elysian Grove is an enchantment creature that costs 3 mana, and it lets you play an additional land on each of your turns. Prismatic Vista is a generic and a green, and it's just an enchantment that sits in play, and it does the same thing for your lands, but it's not a body, so it's a little bit harder to kill, but you don't get to play an additional lands. Like, your lands just are every basic land type. So if your deck's playing those things, I could see playing Slimefoot Survey. You still get to dig for your 5, as long as you have a land in play after you play it, which you should. That's mainly what I have for today. So I've been talking to a buddy. He's a buddy. I'll call him a buddy. We're not Canadian, so I wouldn't say good buddy. Definitely a buddy. I very much enjoy playing with this particular person that I'm referencing. He likes running different deck ideas by me, and I like giving him my input. But he mentioned that, he was looking to pick up a few things. One thing in particular, and he's like, if I bought this, I'd probably play this for months on end, to the point where I would be sick of everything that I'm doing. And I was like, go ahead and do it. Your money, your wallet, do what you want, build the decks you want, play the decks you want, all that fun stuff. I'm not here to hate. I'm not here to do any of that. But just as a fair warning, as someone who has stepped away from the game 3 separate times and still can't really just stay away, if you do it, and you know who you are, you know what I'm talking about. If you do it and you get sick of it, it'll probably make you want to step away from the game for a little while, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Every once in a while, I personally feel that Magic players, whether you're new, whether you're old, whether you've been here since the start, just joining us now, whatever the case is, as a player, newer players coming into the game, I personally do feel that, like, it's a good idea to step away every now and again, to kind of just, like, reset your inner ideas, not necessarily your inner focus, just, reset your mentality as far as the game is concerned, reset how you feel about some of these things. I'll be perfectly honest, I've played against people who, they can sit down and they're just like, ah, it's a game, it's cool, it's a game. I can do that sometimes, but most of the time I will say this, I try my absolute best to leave it in the game, or in the realm of the game. So a lot of people are like, you shouldn't take you shouldn't take your negative emotional state with you between games. So like if you were to play a game and then somebody like really did something that like completely steamed you, buttered your biscuits, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm Southern, so I butter your biscuits. Uh, Whatever the case is, and then you play with that person again. A lot of newer players, they take everything as fun, but a lot of newer players, and I do this a lot too. We kind of hold a grudge, and then we take that grudge with us into the next game and just focus that player. We're just like, you know what, you made the last game a nightmare for me to play in and all that stuff. I'm just gonna hard focus you. Oh, you played a land, we're gonna kill it. You played a creature, we're gonna kill it. You played a spell, we're gonna counter. Just whatever. Just like whatever the case is. If you're playing something and I have something to disrupt what you're doing, I'm gonna do it 100%, and we're just gonna hard focus your face so that you get the message that we didn't like what happened. A lot of players, sure, we can still enjoy the game, but a lot of players do that. They'll take those grudges and those hurt feelings of like feeling like they've been personally attacked or whatever the case is with them between games as they play with people, and uh all that kind of stuff. And then you just sometimes that gets to a point where people are just like, all right, well, maybe I just don't want to play with you, because every time I play with you, if I win or if I do X, Y, Z, whatever the case is, if I play with you a second game, I know that you're hard focusing me on that second game. Um, and it does. Like that's another thing that comes with the territory of Magic, I guess, is when you play with a specific play group and you play with that play group enough, you all start playing roughly the same level. You start playing similar cards, but you also start learning people's play styles without even knowing that you're learning their play styles. Like, so I had a buddy talk to a mutual friend of mine and his, and he explained that, like, I like doing the two-headed giant events with Dan because I'm a very fast paced aggressive player. I don't really have patience, but Dan has patience. He'll sit there and be like, no, we should wait this or whatever that, or whatever the case is, which is something that I picked up over my 24 years of playing the game. Um, when I first started playing out, I was very much turn one creature, it better have haste so I can punch you. Turn two creatures, they better have haste so I can punch you. Turn three more creatures, they better have haste so that I can punch you. Any leftover cards in my hand at this point are direct damage spells, and just I want your face should be melted. Um, so like I starting out, that's the kind of player I used to be. Red deck wins, red deck all the way. Um, I like my lands. I like being able to play things. I like being able to interact, even if the only interaction is me interacting with myself. Um, it's I've over the years I've just kind of picked up like slow down a little bit. Even an aggro player needs to slow down a little bit, because sometimes you can miss triggers. Sometimes you can get caught up in everything that's going on and realize that something doesn't work the way you want it to, but it's too late because effects have already resolved or whatever the case is, in your higher levels of play. So I just, over the years, I've just kind of learned to slow down as far as my plays and stuff are concerned. And when you do that, or when you play with a specific group for a long period of time, you pick up on the little nuances of like, oh, he's playing a deck that has this color. I guarantee you one of his slots is this card, or this card, or whatever the case is. And you can almost always tell when they've got that card in hand, because maybe how they're tapping their lands, how quickly or slowly they're playing their cards, the sequence of card choices that they're making, whatever the case is. Um, and whenever you pick up on those nuances, or pick up on those things and how they play, without you'll pick it up without even knowing you've picked it up. 100%, you will sit there and you'll sit there and you'll play with the same group 2-3 times a week for 2 or 3 years, and 3 years in you'll be like, oh, I'm gonna build this deck and it's gonna play these cards because I know you just inadvertently know your play group is going to play XYZ, and the cards you're playing are going to counteract XYZ. So the deck that you're playing plays those strictly to counteract the things that you hate most that your typical play group plays. And you'll, like I said, you'll pick up on it and not even realize you've picked up on it. But when you do that, I'll be perfectly honest. When you do something like that, you become, I don't want to say you become, let's change that. I personally have an opinion that as a player, when that occurs, a player becomes a worse player, because at this point you are not fully assessing the board state, and you're not properly threat assessing. At that, once it gets to that point, you are, everything you're doing as a player is based on instinct, and is 98% of the time a reaction to something occurring that you don't like. And you don't, that 98% of the time when that occurs and you don't like it, you're doing a reaction based on instinct. You're not looking at, maybe I should let this interaction occur because it would be better for me in the long run, because it gets rid of all these problems. I might have a really good setup right now, but maybe there's a problem over here or a problem over there, and stuff I can't interact with, and that stuff's going to kill me eventually. And even though I have a good setup going, knowing that those things are going to kill me eventually because I don't have the things I need to get rid of that stuff. Say somebody else plays something that deals with that, but also gets rid of my setup. Maybe I just need to let it happen. And take it from there, instead of being reactional and being like, I'm going to make your spell, not I'm going to counter your spell, or whatever the case is. Just going to be perfectly honest from my point of view, based on my 24 years of play, my personal opinion. When you play with a consistent play group on a regular basis for a long enough time period, you pick up certain things and you react instinctually versus reacting based on threat assessment. And I do that a lot. I 100% do that a lot. But I'm not as bad as some of the players that I see doing it all the time. But I think that's due to the fact that I've played for 24 years and I've learned to be a little more slower. Like, yes, I still have those moments where it's like somebody plays something and my instinct is to 100% play something that says no, or play something that says I'm unaffected by this. And most of the time I feel like that's the best play at that moment. But when I can get myself to a non-emotional state as far as gameplay is concerned, and just kind of take a breather and look at things, and it's like, well, I really want to play this card and protect my board, but if I play this card and protect my board, maybe somebody else wants the board to die more, and I'll get like if I play my card, maybe somebody else will play a counterspell because they're okay with giving up their board state. Maybe their board state isn't as much as mine, but they're okay with losing it because I also lose my stuff. So if I play my card to protect my board, they might play a counterspell to counter my board protection. And maybe when that happens, I lose my way to be able to get my protection spell back. So maybe I just let the spell happen, or the effect, or whatever the ability is, or the spell, whatever's attempting to resolve that gets rid of my board state. Maybe I just let it happen. Sure, that player can keep their counter magic up, but I get to keep my protection spell. And the other thing is, a protection spell is only as good as your board state is. Like, the value of a protection spell is only as good as your board state is. So, like, if you have one or two things and somebody blows everything up and you're like, I want to protect my one or two things that I have, your protection spell, they're just like, all right, cool, we're not worried about those one or two things. You can have it, because it's not a valuable enough card at that moment. But like, if you have a board of 10 or 12 things in play, and basically you're the threat and all your things are big, nasty, and mean, and somebody plays a board wipe, and then you play a protection spell that protects your board, well, now that protection spell's worth a whole, it might be 1 mana and it protects your whole board, but now it's worth basically paying 10 or 11 mana to counter it, because your board state is so drastically problematic. So board protection spells are good, but they are only as good as your board state is. So because of that, they are probably one of the more misplayed, misunderstood, and misvalued and miscountered types of spells in the game. Yeah. That's all I really have off the top of my head for today. So we covered the second rule of Cardboard Kitchen. Eldrazi, legendary Eldrazi's no swing. We covered another mana base option, which I think Wizards should fix, which is the original filter lands, which is a generic mana in, get 2 colors out, but doesn't make mana on its own. We need the 5 other of those for the mana cycles. I talked heavily about the Ranger's Path and Skyshell Claim, predominantly playing both of those. And then I just went over a whole debacle of playing protection spells and how valuable they are, and not taking your grudges with you, doing your absolute best. I know for some players it's difficult, but doing your absolute best to not take any grudges that you have about a game that has just transpired into another game with the same players, or at least one of the same players. The value of protection spells. Also, slowing down playing. I talked about, like, if you have a play group that you play with on a regulatory basis and consistently, that you're going to pick up various nuances and knowledge and things that you're not going to realize that you pick up about how they play. Don't be too hasty to react to something. Definitely weigh your pros and cons whenever something happens. I guess I'll go over one last thing. Making your opponents sweat. So I say this with a slight grin on my face. If you're playing blue, you don't have to play counter spells. You really don't. But if you do, you can make your opponents sweat. This gets under people's skin a lot, and it really makes them think. So here's the other thing. I enjoy playing what I call teaching games. If we both have a deck that's roughly the same power level, I will sit down with you, and if you want to learn how to play... Apologies. So that's the other thing. If any of you watching, listening, whatever the case is, are out somewhere and you see me and you're a newer player and you want to sit down and have a learning game with me, and you have two decks that are roughly the same power level, and I do mean the same power level. I grew up around it. I've seen it. It still happens today. I see people who are newer players who have two decks. One deck is just, it's a deck that's thrown together that meets all the criteria for deck building, but is basically worthless. And then there's another deck that's optimized, synergies, all that fun stuff. And they sit down and it's two friends, and they're, the one's been playing for a little bit, but not that long, and they're teaching their other friend how to play. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm going to play this deck and you can play this deck. And usually the person teaching is in this scenario, playing the overpowered deck and is going to win every single game. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, that's going to discourage, if you are two friends and this scenario is happening, that's going to discourage your other friend from wanting to play the game altogether. And honestly, in the long run, it might discourage them from being your friend, period. So maybe don't do that. But if you're a newer player and you want to sit down and you want to learn, and you have and you're in a store where I'm at and I've got some free time, usually if I'm in a store and you see me, I've probably got free time. It's very rare that I don't, because I probably wouldn't be in that store if I didn't have free time to begin with. But if you've got two decks that are roughly the same power level, and you want to learn, or you want to sit down and run through some stuff with me, or whatever the case is, by all means, come up to me, ask me questions. So I became a rules advisor under the DCI before we moved over to Judge Academy. I retook all of my qualification tests and everything and became a rules advisor under the Judge Academy. I qualified to take the L1 judge test under the Judge Academy rules and under the DCI, and I never went through with it for whatever the reason was. I just never went through with it. And last I heard, they're going away from Judge Academy and they're doing something else with their rules altogether, as far as like getting judges and all that kind of stuff. Depending on what it is and what's involved, I might go under the new leadership thing, whatever it is, and become a rules advisor again. So essentially, I'm a rules advisor. If you have questions, I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If I don't know the answer, I will try to look it up. Some answers are, some questions are easier to answer. It's easier to find the answers than it is to ask the question online and get an answer. But if I'm in a store and you're there and you want, even if you're not a newer player, if you want to sit down and do a learning game with me and ask me questions and all that kind of stuff as play progresses, 100%, I'm probably going to be down for it. Just again, make sure that both decks are on the same power level. I honestly don't even care what format. I've played against people in Legacy. I've played Modern. I've played Pioneer. I've played Pauper. I've played Standard. I've played Commander. I never played Extended, and I never played Block, and I've never played Vintage. But that's about it. There's a special Momir format that you can play on Magic the Gathering Online, specifically MTGO, not MTG Arena. But I don't have MTGO. And if I did, I wouldn't play that format. That is the most not heinous. It's not a heinous format, but it is definitely the most nerve-wracking because it is 100% up to luck. 100%. I'm not playing that format. Not at all. I played it once. No, thank you. Um, oh, if you're new here, welcome. Thanks for hopefully watching till the end. I probably should have started out with that. Hopefully, you made it all the way here. If you did and you liked the video, leave a thumbs up. Leave the comments in the comment section. Let me know what you thought, what your thoughts were. Right now, I don't heavily interact with comments on the videos, but I do try to go through and read the comments and see what everybody's talking about. And in future videos, I try to address those comments in some way, whether it's I had an idea for this, or I had an idea for that, or whatever. Um, I try to address those comments by making more videos to address those things, so that the message can get out there instead of just commenting a reply. Um, and if you're not subscribed. That's the other thing, guys. Viewers, people. 2/3 of you are not subscribed out of all the people that watch my videos, which apparently is a faster growing number than I expected, which I greatly appreciate. But for if you're watching my videos and you're not subscribed, well, why not? If you're coming back to watch the videos all as it is, it doesn't hurt you in any way to like my video. So if you like the content, like it. It doesn't hurt you in any way to comment on the videos. If you want to make a comment, by all means, go ahead. It doesn't hurt you in any way to subscribe. If you're already coming back and watching these videos as I get them put out, as I get them posted and uploaded and everything, there's no reason you shouldn't just go ahead and subscribe as it is. And while you're at it, hit that notification bell just so you can be notified when I put more stuff out. If you're not subscribed and you don't hit that notification bell, but you find yourself every couple of days coming back and like, has he posted a new video yet? Has he done something else yet? Trying to see all the comments and everything, or trying to see all the videos and everything. Go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit that bell, because clearly you're here. You just haven't done either one of those things yet, and it doesn't hurt you in any way. If anything, it helps me. But helping me might help you. I might put out some kind of content that greatly helps you as a player, that greatly helps you with deck building, or your preferred play style, or even choice in play group, or anything of that matter. Just hit the thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell, make a comment, and hopefully I'll be back soon. Hopefully things will settle a little, I hope, with some of the stuff that's been going on. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks.